Zach Fleischman, Leslie Glickman, Phyllis Coleman, Hannah Pickworth, and Cricket Willison. You all have done a phenomenal job putting this together tonight. And also our thanks to the overall READY committee, the Grants Lab team, and the steering committee members for their guidance and support with all this work. We are really excited to be a part of this tonight, and I'm really looking forward to learning with the rest of you. So thanks very much, and we'll turn it back over to Susan Sachs-Fleischman.
Good evening. There are many reasons that I am thrilled to be part of this presentation of concepts and ideas that may be new to many of you, but one of them is that 2 months ago, they were new to me. So first, let's look at why is this topic even important? Each and every one of us is here today because we want to make our community stronger and better for everyone, especially the most marginalized among us. We have worked hard and accomplished a lot. But in the past several years, it has become evident, not only in philanthropy, but throughout our nation's business, entertainment, political, and social structure, that important, valuable voices were not being heard. Across the country, in all sectors of the economy, there's a growing emphasis on partnership to promote exclusiveness. To promote inclusiveness. Okay. Giving circles from Virginia to Texas to Oregon are looking at new ways to partner with the community as well as with existing and potential grantees to make impactful grants. They've been exploring ways to weave trust-based philanthropy and participatory grant making into their basic fiber. You may hear many new ideas tonight that may seem foreign, even radical. You will probably have many questions, which we will try to answer as we go along. Remember, this is just an opening discussion, the beginning of a conversation, probably the first of many. So what is participatory grant making and trust-based philanthropy? Okay. Participatory grant making is the practice of addressing grant making power by including affected community members and constituencies. This form of grant making requires both a recognition of the unequal power relations inherent in philanthropy, as well as a conscious effort to rebalance that. Trust-based philanthropy suggests that funder-grantee relationships are stronger when they are built on the foundation of trust. Funders are motivated by the core belief that efforts to create social, political, and economic equity are more successful when they proactively work to alleviate power imbalances by embedding trust, dialogue, and relationship building into their practices with grantees. Because these two concepts are so closely related in both purpose and practice, we will use the term trust-based philanthropy to represent both. Sometimes we will refer to it as TBP. So what does trust-based philanthropy actually look like? It has many moving parts, and each foundation looking to adopt some form of it will have to determine how it might fit into their values and vision. No matter where a foundation starts its trust-based journey, to fully embody this approach, grant makers rely on trust-based values to guide their organization's culture, structure, leadership, and practice. Some giving circles partner with grantees and nonprofit leaders to craft their application process. Others give larger, fewer grants. Some award one major grant, but recognize all finalists with smaller grants. Others have modified their reporting practices by placing more trust in their grantees. Tonight, you will hear from a group in Oregon that did the hard work of crafting trust-based practices to fit their particular organization, grantees, and community. You will also hear about our Circle's Grants Learning Lab project that is being developed with community partners. Our goal tonight is to give you an overview of what is being done and why we might want to pay attention. We encourage you to think about our BWGC values: equity and inclusion, connection and relationships, collaboration, and continuous learning, and how they might be enhanced by trust-based philanthropy. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Susan. During the rest of our evening, we will hear about another giving circle that has implemented trust-based philanthropy. And there will be a question and answer time immediately after. Then we will hear from members of our Grants Learning Lab, followed by a second question and answer period. Donna Cobb, a past Circle co-chair, will be our moderator. Please put all of your questions into the Q&A, which is at the bottom of the screen, not the chat. The chat will be disabled during the program. The Q&A button, again, is located about 2 buttons over from the chat button. So now we're going to hear from our guest speaker, Tammy Wilhoit, who has flown in on Zoom webinar from 99 Girlfriends, Portland, Oregon. Welcome, Tammy. Tammy is in her 7th year with 99 Girlfriends and currently serves as chair of the Coordinating Council, which is the working board of the organization. Her background in customer service, human resources, and nonprofit management have allowed her to contribute to the collective in a manner that she finds very fulfilling. She loves the challenges of problem solving, the efficiencies, collaboration, and the joys of human connection. In her spare time, Tammy enjoys the practice of yoga, walking in the woods, kayaking with friends, and spending time with her husband of 25 years and their 3 young adult offspring. It's your turn, Tammy.
Thank you for that lovely introduction, Phyllis. I'm kind of choked up. You made me sound like someone I'd want to be friends with. And I'm thrilled that you all are learning about this. It's been really rewarding and educational experience for our Giving Circle, and I'm honored to be here to share our experience with you. So I'm going to keep my conversation pretty high level so that there's plenty of time for Q&A. So please do use that Q&A button that Phyllis let you know about. And I'm going to start just by sharing our origin story so that you know a little bit more about who 99 Girlfriends began as. And then the slide that's in front of you is who we've become today. So 99 Girlfriends was started when Eileen Brady and Deborah Edward met at a social event in 2015. And Deborah was relatively new to Portland from Austin, Texas, and Eileen had been living in Portland for quite some time. And in a conversation in the kitchen, because we all end up in the kitchen, Deborah, who's a rather competitive New Yorker, said that she knew a woman from Austin who had put together a group of 100 women that each donated $1,000 to create this collective giving circle. And Portland didn't have anything like this. So Austin was clearly more philanthropic. And Eileen, who, if you know her, is pretty competitive and also very proud Portlander. Took on the challenge immediately. Her Portland pride got the best of her. And by the time the night had closed, they had women committed to starting a group that they were going to call 99 Girlfriends Giving Circle. And they did it. In 2016, they launched it after talking to Washington Women's Foundation, the Women's Foundation of Oregon, the Women's Collective Giving Grantmaking Network, which is now Philanos, and grant makers of Oregon and Southwest Washington. And so it was all volunteer, and it still is. And they thought, let's try to get 30 women to do this first year. And they got 117. So they were able to do a big $100,000 grant because they decided they were going to start with the Impact 100 model. So that's just a little bit of a background of how we started. Our groups, our membership skewed retired white women because they were all friends inviting friends, and there wasn't much outreach beyond that. And they tended to have a lot of friends that were like them. And now, Cricket, if you can show the first slide, you'll see how we have changed a little bit from that time. The first one that talks about being an inclusive women's giving circle, that one. Yeah, thank you. So we now, we invite all people who identify as being female or non-binary to participate, because these are all people that have been excluded from traditional philanthropy. So we're more inclusive in that regard. And we really focus on equity inclusion. And we don't believe that we can accomplish what we're here to accomplish if we don't make sure that everyone feels welcome and that we're thinking about equity. Let's see. So that's really the biggest change that we've made in the last 7 years with regard to the focus of our mission. Let's talk now about the financial impact that we've had to date. And you can see that in slide 2. And what I'd like to talk about here is the first couple of years, we were Impact 100 model, and you can see we had 117 members. We gave $117,000. And then in 2018, we had our first little hiccup with the Impact 100 model because we had 401 members. And the way that we were interpreting the Impact 100 model was for every 100 women, you gave a $100,000 award. And we give in 5 areas. That means 4 areas would have gotten a $100,000 award, and 1 would have gotten a $1,000 award. And we knew that wasn't going to be acceptable. So we started fiddling around with the Impact 100 model. And that's when we learned, you know, we can be flexible. It's a model, it's a guide. Let's figure out what works for Portland. Then in 2019, we had accrued enough matching awards and matching gifts and things to be able to add more money to our grant pool. And that's continued since, although you may see, as we are seeing, that employers are tightening that up and we may not see the matching gifts that we've seen in the past. The other thing you'll probably notice here is that we experienced pretty rapid growth over those first 5 years, and then we're starting to contract a little bit. And in a nutshell, that's because our founding members committed to 5 years. They didn't pay for 5 years, but they committed that they'd stay for 5 years. The founders committed to 5 years. And their goal was to fund each of our 5 areas with a $100,000 award. So everybody stayed put, and everybody had this shared vision of giving this big award. And then at 5 years, our founders stepped away, shared leadership with others. Some of the founding members decided to take a break, and a little thing called a pandemic happened and really shook the world and really changed 99 Girlfriends too. In 2020, we really began digging into trust-based philanthropy, initially because right before the pandemic, we had spent a lot of time learning with Philanos at the conference in Seattle. And then when we entered the pandemic, we were making a really conscious effort to get our funds out to the nonprofits sooner, to just strip away any sort of barriers that slowed things down. And we realized, you know what, this change isn't as hard as we thought it would be. We have the ability to be really nimble as a all volunteer collective giving circle that foundations may not have. We have a very small and connected board of governing board that works with us. And our working board / coordinating council, we're the ones doing the work. So we have so much control, and I'm sure that you all do too. So also in 2020, one of our member education opportunities was to be on what was called a spotlight study group. And the idea was that we would spotlight certain issues going on in the community to see if they might be areas that we would want to fund in the future. And one of these study groups was called Reducing Racial Disparities. And what they found was that race is still a powerful indicator of outcomes in Portland. And so it became very important to us to focus on that and see how could we make an impact in that area. So based on that data and the racial unrest that was really unfurling in the US has been for a long time, but in a different way, was more overt. We hired a racial equity consultant after polling our members for support. And we spent the rest of the year reflecting on how we could embed racial equity in the work, learning about race-related issues, learning about ourselves, about implicit bias, about racial bias. We spent a lot of time and energy learning how we could do better. And then in 2021, we established what's called our Racial Equity Committee, much like your READY committee. And it's their job to help us embed racial equity in all of our practices and to make sure it's always part of our educational opportunities. The work is going well, and the work is ongoing. So now let's see. Cricket, can you show slide 3, please? In 2021, we adopted the tenets of trust-based philanthropy, and we looked at all of them, but we made a decision to only incorporate the ones that we felt would be sustainable for our organization, for being an all volunteer, for being a circle that only asks members to commit to 1 year at a time, being a circle that has leaders tend to spend 2 years and then they roll off. We had to figure out what we could do, what we could start doing that we could keep doing, and what would make an impact in the community. And part of the way, we don't subscribe to an all or nothing model. We believe that we should be learning all the time. We should be evolving. And this is really strong tenet for us. We do the best that we can with the resources that we have. We do not seek perfection. So the tenets that we chose to incorporate were giving unrestricted funding, simplifying and streamlining our paperwork, being transparent and responsive, soliciting and acting on feedback, and offering support beyond the check. Some of these we'd already been doing, but we learned how to do them differently. We learned how to do them better. And now, if you'd like to move to slide 4, I'm going to start with the challenges and some things that we learned. I don't know about you all, but I'm one of those people who wants to hear the bad news first and then the good news after. So we're going to talk about challenges. So our first effort at making things easier for nonprofits with regard to the application made things much harder on our volunteers, and we had a lot of burnout. Our overzealousness to simplify and streamline the paperwork and to take on the burden of the work and take that off of the nonprofits was was overboard. We didn't ask enough questions on the application to get all the information that we needed to make good decisions about funding. So we had our, what we call grant review teams, doing research on organizations when we should have gotten the information directly from the organizations. Another challenge was implicit bias and a lack of trust and a recognition that we lacked trust. Some of our members realized they didn't trust the nonprofits to spend their money wisely. And they were really concerned about reporting. We now have a training module that's required for all volunteer grant review team members that's about implicit bias. It's about reducing bias. It's about stopping at different points in the process, acknowledging what's coming up for us and asking for help. We also have held membership-wide opportunities around this kind of learning, racial bias, gender bias, microaggressions. Just all of these things come into who you invite into your giving circle, who you choose to fund, who you choose to put into leadership positions. So, and they help you be a better human if you know what your, I would say, weaknesses are, areas where you could be a kinder, more inclusive, more respectful human being. So even people who don't get involved in the grant making process have the opportunity to opt into that. And they've been some of our most popular programs ever. The challenge of moving from saving people to partnering people was an interesting one. If you're thinking of yourself as funders of a project that can't happen without you, it's really easy to feel like a savior. And let's be honest, that can feel really good. But it's not good because you're holding the power, and other people have just as much right to that power to be able to make a difference as you do. You just have the money to do it. And we have to share those funds because other people have the expertise that we may not have. So we've also held membership-wide education about that. And we talk about the fact that the nonprofits are experts in their field, and we are here to help them do their job by partnering with them. So what we say is, we see you're doing great work in this area. You're the expert in your field. We would like to partner with you by providing some funds versus we'd like to fund you. And the language really does make a difference. If we can partner with them in that way, we give them the space to decide how to use the money in the best way that they can. And we don't know what that is. They know what that is. They're doing the work. And I'd like to give you an example for this one. One of our impact partners, which is what we call our grantees, because we see that grantee has a power, grantor, grantee, there's a power thing there that we don't want going on. So they are our impact partners. Constructing Hope received a $90,000 unrestricted award from us. And what Constructing Hope does is they offer a no-cost 10-week construction skills and life skills pre-apprenticeship program for disadvantaged men and women. And then that allows them to move into construction jobs and be able to support themselves and make a great living for themselves. So when they received our unrestricted $90,000 award, they made the decision to use that money to pay their employees more and to buy healthcare insurance. And what this did was it stabilized their workforce and it allowed them to serve more people instead of having the turnover that they were experiencing. And they were able to stabilize that workforce and serve the community better. They knew what they needed. We would never have guessed that that was how they were going to use the funding. It's changed their organization. So it's important, so important to recognize we may be the experts in like women's collective giving, but they're the experts in doing the work. We also had to find our niche so we could be transparent. So we used to receive hundreds of applications and we might give 3 awards, 2 awards, 4 awards, and we get hundreds of applications. Not only was it a lot of work for our grant review teams, but we had hundreds of nonprofits putting all of this time and energy into applications. So we needed to be able to communicate more clearly about what we intended to fund and what our values were. So the nonprofits could decide whether or not they chose to apply and whether or not they were going to use their their limited resource of time in that way. Lastly, worrying about perfection instead of embracing learning. Although we're a learning organization and we all talk about it all the time, and we really are, a lot of our members join to learn, maybe even more so than the collective giving aspect. We still didn't have total buy-in from our members because some of them wanted us to wait until we understood this perfectly and we could do it 100%. They were fearful that we might make a mistake, we might embarrass ourselves, maybe this wasn't the right way to go. But the majority of us felt that if we wait to figure it all out until it's perfect, it'll never happen because perfection is impossible. And things are always evolving. Trust-based philanthropy has been evolving since it was introduced, as people have had questions or had trouble actually turning it into a reality. They've been able to make adjustments and figure out how we could do this better. So there's no reason we can't take one step at a time and let everybody know that we're learning as we go. And we always talk about that with our applicants, with our partners, with our members. We are a learning organization. We're learning as we go. And let's go ahead and move to the final slide now, the positive impacts of incorporating TBP. Okay, our streamlined application process has made it easier for organizations to apply, and it asks specifically about values-related information like racial equity and inclusion. And this way, we don't have to be any sort of detectives or private eyes, and our nonprofits know what we're going to be funding and what's important to us, so they know if they should apply. And it's affecting change. We have organizations that want to apply and they'll contact us and say, you know, we don't have any racial diversity on our board and we see that that's important to you. Should we apply? And we ask them to reflect on why they don't have that and to apply if they think that the work that they're doing aligns with our values, and explain to us why they're in the situation that they're in. And so it's kind of forcing organizations to also be more inclusive and racially equitable. Let's see, unrestricted awards are, they're also referred to as general operating, and they're life-changing. They sometimes aren't as sexy for us to share the stories about as some of our projects used to be, but that's not what it's about. It's about the nonprofits being able to get the work done to serve the people that they serve. And they're still fully vetted for by our financial review team. They just get to choose how they spend it. And I don't know if you all have ever shared the pizza video with your members, but that's a great video to understand why it matters if nonprofits have the freedom to use their funding. I like to use the example of a household because I think it's really easy to think about and to understand the concept. If you say you have a $2,500 budget for the month and that's it to take care of everything, great. But if you have a $2,500 budget, and then you're told only part of it, this much can be used on food, and this much can be used on utilities, and only this much can be used on gasoline, and only this much can be used on entertainment, it makes things more complicated. You know, what if that month you actually need to replace part of your roof? Where does that come from? So that's enough. The 2,500 that you can use freely, obviously, is the unrestricted, and the other could be, you know, more restricted or restricting to a project. That's not equitable. If you've got a big organization with a great development team who has plenty of time to come up with the dream project, and they can figure out all of the budget, and they can work it out ahead, and they can get other people set to fund it after your funding runs out. And then you may have a smaller nonprofit that's doing just as important of work, but they have a development worker or excuse me, a development person, or maybe their executive director is their development person. They may not have the time and the resources to come up with a project, or they may not even know how it's going to work out. And I have an example of that as well. The first year, the organization that we funded, they were called PDX Bridge Project, and their goal was to provide wraparound services for kids who had been fostered, homeless, or in the correction system, so that they could graduate from high school and move into community college, and graduate from community college and get a job. And they would provide all of the wraparound services that they needed to do that. And their project application to us said that they were going to serve 30 students. And we just loved this project. We funded it. We were super excited about it. And then in the end, they were able to help 6 students, because there were all of these factors that they would not have known about in advance that came into play, and a lot of attrition, and things cost more than they expected they would. People needed more support than they thought that they would. And so that we still felt like that was a wonderful funding, because 6 people's lives were changed. But some people were troubled by the fact that they didn't follow through and help 30 people. So this is one of the challenges of a project-based funding system. And a huge part of trust-based philanthropy is listening humbly. And I cannot overstate that enough. Listening session, listening session, listening session. Ask your applicants what they need. Ask your impact partners how things worked for them. How did the application go? How could we improve it? Were there barriers? We have enacted listening sessions for just about everything. And we give a small honorarium in respect for their time. We get them on Zoom. We ask a couple questions. We put ourselves on mute and we let them talk. And we've gotten so much great information and feedback. For instance, after the 2020 funding, when we gave more grants of smaller size, more awards of smaller size, because of COVID, what we heard from our partners was, don't do that. What makes you different is you give big money for things that we can never make happen, or enough money that we can use it for multiple years. And if you reduce the funding and give more awards, then we won't have anybody that's giving big awards. So if we hadn't had that listening session with them, we wouldn't have known that. And we may have thought we were doing more good by having more smaller awards. And what we heard was a resounding no. We need you to give big awards. It's also important to take their advice and use it and credit them. Like, thanks to our impact partners, we're doing this thing differently, because it builds trust. And then they'll talk to you. They'll share with you, hey, we think you could do this thing better. Or this was a real challenge over here. Do you expect to continue to do it that way? And that communication, that listening, that accepting is a relationship building. And it's proved to be very, very helpful to us. We also offer liaisons to all of our impact partners. So they have a girlfriend or two that's in regular contact. And if they say, hey, we need volunteers for this thing, we get it out to the girlfriends. If they are having a big gala or something, we get that out to the girlfriends. And that's part of the giving beyond the check for us. We also became more open with our reporting process, because as long as we have an idea of how you used our funds so that our members who contributed can understand the impact they're having, that's really all we need. So we just let them know, however it works for you to let us know. The manner of the reporting isn't important. We've gotten videos, written reports, phone calls. We've heard podcasts where they talked about it. It's been wonderfully diverse and really interesting for us to share with our members and to hear in the variety of ways that work for them to tell us what's going on. And let's see. We also find that trust-based philanthropy shows respect for applicant organizations. We show, let's see. Finalist awards. So we used to just give the big awards and then we'd give what was left of our pool. But what we learned in Seattle in large part was, if you have 10 organizations that have gone through everything together, and then you have your members vote, and then 5 of them get big awards and 5 of them get nothing, what kind of relationship are you building with those 5 who got nothing? And what are you saying about the time and the energy and the commitment that they put in? So, and ever since, we give finalist awards, and they're sizable. So for example, in 2022, we gave 5 $70,000 impact awards, and we gave 5 $15,000 finalist awards. And then semifinalists got $1,500 each as a gift, just because they also had to go through a lot of our process. And the feedback and the respect that we've received for honoring their time in that way and through the honorarium is shocking. It really makes a difference, because you're not just taking, you're sharing, there's an exchange, and it helps develop a partnership of mutual respect. So lastly, I'm getting ready to shut up here. I could go on about this for a long time, because it's been really interesting, really rewarding, and there's a lot to learn. But I just want to put in a plug for you to learn more about trust-based philanthropy and consider doing it, because every giving circle is different. Every community is different, but everything that I've read about Baltimore Women's Giving Circle is that you are a highly respected organization. You're a well-established organization. You've been around for decades. You could be a leader in this work. There are great models out there. There's support of the Trust-Based Philanthropy Project, Philanos, other collective giving circles. There's no reason that you can't find a way to do it that works for you, because you're already doing great work. And now I'd be happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Hi, Tammy, it's Dawn. Nice to see you on Zoom after emailing back and forth. Yes, we have lots of questions. So, and we have a bit like 10 or 15 minutes max, I think.
Okay.
So, are your impact partners able to apply again?
Yes, because that we believe that that's part of the multi-year funding. We don't fund for more than 1 or 2 years at a time, because our members only commit for 1 year, and we never know how long we'll still be around. But if we allow them to apply more than once, then we feel like that's an interpretation of the multi-year funding tenet of trust-based philanthropy, which allows them to stabilize their budget.
Right, right. And a number of people want to know about the pizza analogy. We don't know that.
Yeah, well, there's a great video. I encourage you to look for it on YouTube, and I'll find the link
Yeah,
and
send me the link and I'll
with you.
share it. I'll share it with everybody.
Yeah.
Other people want to know if the demographics of your circle have changed at all since you've started this trust-based philanthropy approach. Have you noticed any change in that? You know, because we're a very white circle. We have tried very hard to diversify over the years and have not been successful. So we've decided to step back and kind of look at ourselves like you just described. And so just curious if you've either have any grantees have joined, if you've allowed for grantees to join, maybe, or no, partners, excuse me, impact partners to join. Anyone's joined or has expressed an interest in joining?
Yeah, great question. So we are similar to you in that we skew white, and we've done a lot of work to diversify our membership more, and we've had some successes with that. We also haven't gotten as far with that as we would like to, and what we've realized is we need to own who we are. Instead of trying to change our membership, we want to make sure everyone knows they're welcome, and that there is a way to contribute here, and that they will be respected here. And we're still going to do this really important work, even if we're majority white. I would say that we lost maybe 5 members who said everything isn't about race and chose to move on. But the majority of our members want to be better humans. They want to be better at racial equity. They've really dug in, and they've done a lot of learning.
Yeah, and that's very interesting to hear, because I know it's a difficult conversation, right? To have this conversation, it can be very uncomfortable. We've certainly had that experience. How would you say the partner profile has changed since you've made this approach, changed this approach to your grant making?
I would say the biggest difference is we've always funded organizations that serve underserved populations. It just seemed to happen that way. I don't know if it's where our members come from, because it was even before we had racial equity explicitly stated in our values that we would tend to help the underserved. But what the biggest difference is, oftentimes in the first couple of years, those were white-led organizations. And now we look for organizations led by people who have been part of the population they are serving, or people of color. And they get a second look from us, because we don't want to continue that traditional philanthropy of funding white male leaders and all of that. We want to fund organizations that are incorporating the experiences of their people and are listening to their people about what they need instead of telling their people what they need.
Right. Well, you mentioned you broke into groups, and did you call them life study groups?
Spotlight study groups.
Spotlight study group. I'm sorry, spotlight study groups. So there was what were the other ones? There was racial equity.
One was about health and wellness, and what the health, basically what kind of health issues we had going on in the community. I remember that one because I was the leader, and it ended up being all about mental health, and that shouldn't be a surprise, but it was to me. Homelessness was one of them. And I don't remember if there were more beyond that, but they are on our website if there were. And the report from the racial disparities group is also on our website, and it is available to everyone.
Oh, good. Okay, I'll look. So in the lessons learned, you talked about how in your enthusiasm, the first go around, you had burnout from your members. So what compromise did you reach, or what did you start doing differently after that experience in either your application or the process that you use?
Great question. You know how sometimes you go way too far this way and then you have to come back to the middle? Well, that's what we did. And we had volunteer grant steering committee leaders write the application. And that year that we went a little too far, putting the work on ourselves. And then when we recognized we needed more help, we did some outreach within our community to somebody who had more experience in trust-based philanthropy, writing an application that asks the right questions to get the information that we need. And so we have a very different application this year than we did last year, but it's got the culture of trust-based philanthropy in it. It still asks questions like about outcomes, but in a way that's, do you have a way to recognize the outcomes of what you're doing, instead of how are you going to tell us what the outcome is of the work that you're doing? So Philanos has lots of great resources. You can get applications from other organizations. You can take all that and morph it for yourself. And we do a lot of that. We reach out to others and say, what models worked for you? And that was the answer for our application.
When you're looking, or how many grant review teams do you have?
5.
And how many members does each group have?
No more than 10.
Okay. And when do you take applications? When are they due?
Well, we're accepting applications right now. This year, we're doing things a little bit differently because we're doing strategic planning. But we have about a month-long application period. And the way that let me talk about the way we're doing it this year, which although it's different, so this wouldn't be necessarily a model for everybody else, but we're trying what some other organizations that I've spoken to have done. And we're having a grant making workshop this year. And so we have experienced and new members who want to do the grant review teams coming to a one-day workshop. They'll have read their applications in advance, and they'll have done their training in advance, because we've got all of that for them to do virtually from home. And then they'll come to a workshop, they'll sit down with their team, and they'll have 2 hours to talk about how they're going to narrow down their 10 applicants to 2 applicants. Because what we did this year was we invited all of our past impact partners to apply for additional funding.
Wow. So
We're pretty excited to get that email, I got to tell you.
I bet. So wait a minute. So on average, how many applications would you say you don't do an LOI process, do you? Letter.
We did in the beginning, but we got rid of that as part of our simplification.
Right.
We were getting 200 plus applications, and then we started creating what we called the funding priority statement to clarify what we were looking to fund, and that helped us reduce it further. And now we're doing this. We've got the 50 organizations that we've funded that we've invited to come back and apply. And then we're going to be doing some additional strategic planning around what is our grant making going to look like in the future. Are we going to do this workshop model, or are we going to go back to what we used to do, which is where the teams commit months of work together?
Wow. Do you look at your impact partner applications for their own client integration? And that's a question I'm getting, like, and the questioner says that client advisory boards would be an example of what I mean. And I don't know if the question.
So I'm not sure exactly what the questioner is asking. And if they want to tell you, you could reiterate it to me, but we do use our impact partners as an advisory board to us, but we don't go as far as looking at what they're doing, other than we do ask them about inclusion in their organization, about their board, about like who makes decisions around the programming. How do you incorporate the ideas and the experiences of the people you serve in the work that you're doing? And sometimes they'll talk about having an advisory board. Or
so how do you use them as an advisory board?
We'll have a listening session and say, hey, like for instance, we're going to get a lot of information from them about, as we get prepared to look at how we're going to do our grant making for the next few years. What do we do well that you want us to keep? What doesn't work for you? What do you need from a grant making organization like ours in Portland? And that we'll use that information to design our new program. And it may end up being very similar to what we're doing right now, but.
Right. I'm told I can ask you one more question. Oh, I have many. So how do you convey information about events from your partners? You know, you support them that way. Is it, email, Facebook, Instagram? How do you do it?
So we do amplify their social media posts by sharing them with our members and sharing them broadly. But we also have what we call our member update, which is our twice monthly email to our members. We have what we call impact partner highlights, and there's anything that our impact partners want to share can be run in there. And we get a really great open rate on that twice monthly news. About 80% of our members open that and read about
Well,
what's
that is
our partners.
pretty good, I have to say. That's a great, I'm going to take that to our communications committee. It's a great idea. Tammy, on behalf of everyone who's here, I know there's a lot of people on this call, like 50 plus. We thank you. I hope you're coming to Baltimore in November, are you?
I'm trying. I have to change a trip to come, but it's been such a great experience in the past. So I'm hoping to be there. And I'll look forward to meeting everyone. And I'm happy to do any sort of follow-up conversation or anything that might be helpful. And I wish you all the best in your learning and in your giving and in figuring out what's next for you.
All right. Well, I'm going to thank you again. And I am turning it over now to Lorraine.
Phyllis.
Oh, Phyllis, sorry.
That's okay. And Tammy, thank you so much for being with us tonight. And we've learned so much from you. You've given us a beautiful overview of everything. I don't know if you need to go and be with your family now. Whatever you need to do, that's fine. But we thank you from the bottom of our hearts. It went way above my expectations. So finally, we're going to hear from our BWGC Grants Learning Lab. Lorraine Rolick, a 5-year Circle member and past and current grants reader, and Kieta Iriarte Amim, who is the co-founder and executive director of Be More Empowered, will be speaking to you about their experiences in the Learning Lab. Be More Empowered, just so you know, is a group that supports and encourages women and girls in leadership roles and entrepreneurship. We look forward to hearing from you now. Thank you.
Thank you, Phyllis. I'm Lorraine. Kieta's right next to me, sort of, virtually. Hello to everybody, and thank you for your interest in this topic and for your interest in this experiment that we've been on for the last few months. Kieta and I are here representing this small team of 5 people that was pulled together to kind of experiment with a new grant model for distributing a small amount of our grant pool, $75,000. There are 5 members of the group. Kieta Iriarte Amin is one of the community partners. Crystal Starvis and Naima Sharif, who are on this slide here with their extensive credentials, are the other 2 community representatives on this team. The other Circle representative with me is Katie Ryan Leakin, a longtime Circle member and past and current grants team leader. Before I go into what we've done a little bit, do an overview, I want to address the term pilot. When we had a membership survey in the fall, where we got a lot of support for doing this effort, the term pilot was used, and that was fine. But it seems to come with some baggage that got in the way of understanding what we were trying to do. You know how in the business world, when management wants to make some big changes, they kind of work on what they want to do. And just before they implement it, they'll do a pilot. And that pilot is a way of kind of testing out the change. But sometimes in that environment, those pilots also represent a way to get the rest of the organization comfortable with the change that is coming. we have never been a pilot like that. Our pilot was pretty open-ended. We didn't have any assumption to start with that anything that we were doing with this experiment would end up changing the grant process for the circle anytime soon, and maybe not at all. But we were just trying to figure out some things that we might want to think about in this changing environment in philanthropy. So we adopted a different, more ambiguous but more accurate title of the Grants Learning Lab, because that's what we're doing, we're learning. So what we did when the team came together in the very end of 2022, we've met 5 times so far, starting in mid-January. And most recently we met 2 days ago to decide how we're going to distribute the $75,000 that was our charge to Grant. And we're very excited about that. We're not going to tell you who it is right now, because we're hoping that that is going to be revealed at the Full Circle meeting on May 17th, when all the other new grantees are revealed. So that's something to look forward to, but we're pretty pleased with the groups that we got to work with. Over that time, we produced an interim report, and that covered the history of what we do, the process that we went through from the beginning through March. It's just 2.5 pages. If anyone would like to read it, you're welcome to. Just put your email in the Q&A, I guess, and we'll send you a copy. We haven't posted it generally because it still has that dreaded draft stamp on it. So, but there's nothing secret about it, and you're welcome to look at it. And you'll get more details than what we have. We're also planning to do a final report, maybe as early as June, which will bring the process up to date. And also we'll be talking about some things that we learned and may want to talk about later, discuss more in the future. And the part that I'm kind of interested in is several months after the awards, we would like to get in touch with each of our applicants and see how they thought our process went. You know, if we're thinking that we streamlined the application process, we need to ask them, how did it look to you? Did it look easier? So we want to get that kind of feedback from them. And so there'll be kind of a post-awards follow-up too. What I'd like to do is turn this over to Kieta for a minute, and so she could describe how she responded when we invited her as one of these 3 very well-connected, well-respected community leaders to join this project, and how that first meeting went, because it was a little more productive than we expected. Kieta?
Yeah, good evening. Thank you for the introduction. And also thank you for inviting, myself and the other community consultants to join this really innovative group. I was so excited listening to the 99 Girls presentation. I have a whole notepad full of notes here. And it's really, really intriguing. And I'm really thankful to be a part of this group. So thank you again. And also thank you all for saying my name correctly. Sometimes I don't get I don't get that, but I really appreciate that, that attention and that care. So I was mentioned before, I'm the executive director of Be More Empowered. Our mission is to provide entrepreneurship and wellness programming for Black women and girls. I've been in the nonprofit field. I graduated my master's in nonprofit management from Towson in 2007. So I've been in this field for a good amount of time, and I've intentionally worked with grassroots organizations that are led by BIPOC leaders, and lately, more specifically, BIPOC women leaders. Just creating that space, just thinking about, this is a way to create sustainability for your family, starting your own nonprofit organization, and not only for your family, but to help to grow and to sustain and to improve, where you live, right? And you are giving those resources to community, and opportunities like the Giving Circle and other funders in the city, they help those leaders provide those services. So, without that partnership, it wouldn't be able to happen. And Cricket approach, myself, I was intrigued, I was interested, I've never been a part of a circle like this before, or even knew about the giving circles. We had applied a couple of times through Be More Empowered and support some of our partners in applying, but actually looking behind the scenes and understanding how it works was quite informative. And I learned a lot in this process and learning how all the things work. So in our first meeting, we had to learn each other. We did introductions, understanding our expectations as consultants, and then thinking and getting into the weeds about what the criteria was going to be. We understood that there was $25,000 that's available, right? But what else? What else will we have to not just offer, but what are those requirements for the grassroots organizations? Then after thinking and after working with the team, some things we eliminated and some things stayed. So you had to be a 501c3 status or fiscally sponsored by an organization. It had to have proof of being a community-led organization. The budgets had to be under $250,000. And these were restricted funds. And the organizations had to express alignment with the mission of the Baltimore Women's Giving Circle. So, and that took a meeting, right? That took some time to try to figure out exactly. Everybody had their different inputs, their different understanding. Also, community-led has different definitions. And then sometimes that number of under $250,000, I know there was some talk back and forth about, should it be higher? Should it be lower? What exactly is the best practices, and defining what it is to be a grassroots organization. So I think that, we had a really, really good conversation. Those criteria are what we decided to start as the baseline for this particular opportunity.
Okay, we covered a lot in that first meeting, and some of us didn't expect to get right down in the weeds like that, but we did. There was one other decision that was made early on by the circle, and that was that we wanted to pay our consultants. We felt that it was important to compensate our community advisors, both for their expertise, but also for what could be a substantial time commitment. We were thinking it could be as much as 30 hours a piece. And that's a lot of time to ask someone to consult with us when it's us that are trying to learn from them. So we ultimately decided to pay them $1,500 each, which amounts to about 30 hours times $50 an hour. $50 an hour is considerably below their normal consulting fee. So we're very grateful that they were interested in working with us, even though the fee was rather modest from their normal standpoint. We had a lot of issues to cover because we were kind of inventing the process from scratch. So our meetings we had to come to some agreement about a lot of different things that we don't normally think about in the regular circle process because we've already decided those things. So I don't know, Kieta, can you address some of the decisions we had to make?
Of course. A few of the decisions we had to make included the $25,000 as being the total amount that is being offered. How are we going to split that up, and how many awards were going to be offered for this particular opportunity? So we chose, after a great and lengthy discussion, that everyone who applied and completed the application in its entirety would receive something. Similar to what was mentioned in the 99 Girls presentation, everyone who completed the application received an award. So the end result was 2 awards at $10,000 a piece. And then the smaller awards, $250 for everyone who applied for the opportunity. So we will find, how do we find those applicants? We found the applicants from applications that were submitted in former rounds of the Baltimore Women's Giving Circles grant applicants, they were not funded, right? So organizations that applied in previous years and they were not funded. And there was also conversation around, I guess, our familiarity with those organizations. Also, if we knew the leaders, how well we saw them in community. Also, if they were still active now and working in community. There was tons of conversation just about, having a level like foundation around that leader's particular work. And because myself, Crystal, and Naima, not only have we probably worked with, we've worked for, we worked around, a majority of the Black-led and smaller organized and grassroots orgs in the city, everyone had a touch point with all the organizations that were mentioned. How to simplify the application. So then that was the next concern. What was the application going to look like? Similar to what was mentioned before, taking out some of those different restraints and parameters and barriers that exist within philanthropy that a lot of times if a grassroots leader will see that, they'll be overburdened by the administrative burden of completing the application because it just takes too much time away from doing the work. So how do you make this simple? And for us, it looked like a Google form, and you can put your organization information in. Also, it was by invitation, a small pool that was invited to apply. And you had two options. You had a video that you can submit via like YouTube or Loom, whatever system you're using, you would submit the link, or you can do a text option. Those two items, you can do either or. Then there's also a short turnaround time. There was about a 2-week application window for the applicants. We knew that our team didn't have much time to review these applicants, but also, we wanted to make sure we turn around this decision time in enough time so that we can get the funds out the door to where it needs to go. And then also to streamline up the questions. Questions are very simple. Do you align with the mission of the Giving Circle? What's your history in Baltimore? Do you have a 501c3 status? Can you provide proof of your 990 submission? A very simple application process through a Google form that we used.
Okay. Kieta mentioned we decided to start with organizations that had already applied to the circle. We weren't sure that's where we were going to go, but someone pointed out that it might be an advantage to the organizations we invite to apply that they've already heard of us. And so that's one of the reasons we decided to focus on smaller unfunded organizations that had already applied to the circle. So we did that by getting a wonderful spreadsheet from Marianne Pinkard. She looked back 2 or 3 years of our grant applicants and called out the small organizations under $250,000 budgets who had never been funded. And there were quite a few. So the first thing we did was, as Kieta mentioned, we asked our community consultants, have you ever heard of these organizations? And we ended up with 19 that at least one of them had heard of. Not that they knew a lot about them necessarily, but they knew they were out there. So we started with those 19 and divided them up among the 5 of us to take another look. So each of us had 3 or 4 that we were going to look at. We looked at their websites, we looked at their 990s, we looked at social media, whatever we could find, and then got back together to decide how many of those 19 still seem to fit into the parameters that we were looking for this small grant. And that was one of the most interesting meetings that we had. We had a lot of discussion coming from different places and how we perceived how the organizations met our mission or what their financial capabilities were or whatever. There were a number of questions that we raised. But out of that meeting came originally 9, I think, that we thought we might invite, and that eventually dropped to 7 organizations that had previously been unfunded by the circle that we were going to invite to apply. Yeah, I guess you already talked about that process. We were at the point where we knew who we wanted to invite, but we needed an invitation email and we needed an application. And we were thinking, well, you know, how are we going to, we talked a lot about what to include and what not to include in the application. And then we knew it wanted to be online. We knew the application window would be short because the application would be shorter. But we didn't have that yet. And Kieta and Crystal just raised their hand and said, oh, we can do that. And they did. They got together and came up with an application. We all kind of tested it to make sure it worked because, you know, technology. And it did. And we came up with a date to issue everything, which was, I think, mid-April. We gave the applicants 2 weeks to apply. And we got well, I'll get to that in a minute. Is there anything else you want to say, Kieta, about the process of putting that application together?
I think it was fairly simple to put the application together. I know myself and Crystal have done this a number of times, just, you know, working with funders, not in this particular like form, but, you know, in our other roles, putting RFPs and distributing applications to communities. So I think we lended on some of our past knowledge that we had from those other experiences to help us quickly put an application together.
Okay, and we were very grateful that you did. So we were able to put out the invitation. And the first thing we heard back from our 7 applicants was, I'm so sorry, my budget is no longer under $250,000, so I don't qualify. And we thought, well, if you're not going to apply, that is the best possible reason. So we were down to 6 applicants. And I remember Katie worrying, what if nobody applies? We did all this work, and what if nobody responds? But in fact, we got 5 applicants, and 4 of them were by video and 2 were by text, you know, written. And they were all on time. We had given ourselves 1 week to review them all individually before we got together earlier this week to make our decision. So just to step back a little, what we actually did here was try to implement a few elements of trust-based philanthropy. And they arose kind of organically through our decisions of how to apply and what to include and what kind of funding to do. So the elements that we tested here was that the community members had the majority voice in the funding decisions. We ensured that by first ensuring that they had more representation on the team than we did. There were 3 community representatives and 2 circle representatives, but we also paid them for their time and their expertise to reinforce that it's their voices and their perspective and their connections at levels that we don't have that we were trying to value here. We also offered unrestricted funds, which is not unlike the general operating expenses that we offer already in the circle. We tried to simplify the application process, and we shortened the deadline. And we offered those small awards to any complete applicant who didn't qualify for the $10,000, who we didn't grant the $10,000 awards to. So those were the elements that we were testing. Is any of this scalable to the whole circle? Well, the one that we're already doing, offering general operating expenses, certainly is. The others, maybe not, but they're giving us something to think about. If, for example, we want to think about streamlining our application process, I don't know that we could do it for circle-wide the way we did it for this small number of applicants, but there are a number of other ways we might want to think about that. So that's what we were hoping to achieve by experimenting with these limited number of elements of trust-based philanthropy. When I look back on the process, I think we were a pretty collegial group, and we made our decisions mostly by consensus. If there was any thought, and I'm sure that crossed our minds, that we might come to points where differences of opinion might split by circle members wanting to go one way and community members wanting to go a different direction, I don't recall that ever happening. We had differences of opinion and perspectives that were brought up, and we all listened and shared and changed our minds. The meeting on Tuesday sounded a lot like our normal grant readers team meetings. It was just so familiar. We were back and forth about, well, I like this group, but I had a question about this other item here. Someone said, that didn't bother me, but I was worried about this. And what about this organization? I really liked them. I thought they were direct and grounded, and I think they were moving in the right direction. And someone else said, well, do they have the financial capacity to handle this money given the size of their budget? And so it was back and forth, back and forth. We changed our minds multiple times, but we eventually came to a conclusion. So I guess I shouldn't have been surprised, but it sounded just so familiar. And it was just as hard as it always is to try to make the best decision, because we never have enough resources. We want to fund everybody, and it's just so difficult. We had no one leader. People just kind of stepped in as required. We had several aha moments during the course of the process. I don't know if you have any that you would like to share, Kieta. Were there expectations that surprised you or events that surprised you?
I know for me, the thing that stands out are the storytelling and the clarity that was asked from the Giving Circle members. Say if I had a comment about having a particular experience in community or working with community, and then it was like, oh, can you explain more about why you feel this particular way? And I think that as I was expressing myself, the circle members were really absorbing it, right? And interested in listening and thinking about different perspectives, and us having to have a really honest and open conversation just about, the different experiences that we have, all coming from Baltimore City, but showing up and experiencing some of the trauma a bit differently that we tend to face in the city. So being able to be vulnerable and tell those stories, some personal stories, it was very, very important, especially for me, to gain trust of the circle as a leader, and also as I represent, some of the marginalized folks in the community. So that was an aha moment for me, and it really opened my eyes to being open and honest to the group. Mm-hmm.
I know that one of the moments for me that we describe in the interim report too, we were sharing our perspectives about the 19 groups and trying to pare that down to a more manageable group. One of the groups that I had reviewed was had applied for a program teaching meditation for mothers and children. And I thought, they met some criteria, but I was having trouble connecting it to our mission, because my experience with meditation and mindfulness and breathing was, this is a really nice thing. And it's nice to step back from your overscheduled life and artificial deadlines and just breathe a little and take a little space. But I would have been hard pressed to explain how it changed my life. So I was having trouble connecting it to our mission of empowering women, enhancing their movement towards self-sufficiency, opening opportunities. And I just I was having trouble making that case. So I think it was Kieta. She did a lot of this also, like, tell us more about that. So I explained why I was having trouble, and I think it was you. I don't remember for sure. She responded from a different perspective.
So I need to break in here and do the
Okay.
Q&A. Go on forever. I'm so sorry. I'm getting the time out.
Okay, yes, we're down to the last few
Yes,
minutes.
I know. Well, it would, we could all be here a long time. So Kieta and Lorraine, thank you. I guess one question, we don't have a lot of time. A lot of people want the interim reports. We have to explain it's interim. There'll be a final.
Right.
But think about what you heard from 99 Girlfriends. I'd love to know, like, what stuck out to you, what really resonated, what was something that just, like, you might want to mention here. And I know I'm putting you on the spot. It's okay if you can't.
Oh, that's the question. Do you want to start, Kieta, or you want me to start?
Yeah, I think there are a ton of parallels from what they did. I know they're further advanced in some of the work than the Giving Circle is, but there were, at least I know I wrote on my notepad about 10 different ways that that this group can model some of what's happening over in the 99 Girlfriends model. So, I mean, of course, we are talking about the simplified paperwork, being transparent, the offerings, but beyond the check. I think those are always and have been the strongest items. Yes, the PR, publicizing the events, the showing up in the community to support, on the ground, those leaders who you are funding, not just on a site visit, but at an event, and if something fun where everybody's relaxed. But in addition to maybe capacity building supports, technical assistance offerings, helping those organizations get from that to $25,000 mark to $100,000 mark beyond what your opportunity is. So that might be introducing them to other funders or helping them write a pitch to someone else, or doing impact data with them. I can talk about this forever, but
Yes.
but some of those other things, but I really enjoyed, like I said, Tammy's presentation. So I'll let Ms. further.
I'll second all of that. The simplifying application thing was one that stuck out to me, and how easy it is to kind of go overboard with that. And we wrestled with that.
Yeah, was there any suggestion you had that you had to make a hard sell to the Giving Circle ladies?
I think the hardest sell was that the mindfulness piece, where we had a small little bit of back and forth about, but for me, it's just, and for what I do, wellness is pivotal, and even though some of the trauma that's happening might not be directly you and your family, I always talk about my children. They're experiencing the trauma as they're walking to the bus stop, or they're experiencing the trauma as you turn the TV on and you're watching someone that looks like you, unfortunately be killed because you're just outside playing, or just things that you identify with and you really don't know how to deal with that internally. So some of these wellness opportunities, it might look like just like yoga, but for me, like walking at Druid Park or just having time away to breathe is something that is invaluable. I know it helps me. And if we're teaching these tools to youth for when these things happen, because I'm living in the city, it's going to happen. Like things, happen to you, happen to family, happen to those that you love, but you have to have these tools to deal with those things. And these mindfulness programs do that for our youth and for our women.
Well, thank you both so much. I'm speaking on behalf of many people who are on this webinar. We're grateful for the experiment and the just being willing to do it. Kieta being willing to work with us, Lorraine being willing to do this work with Katie and the other ladies. So thank you. I think, am I turning this over to Hannah? You're muted, Hannah.
Unmuted. Here we go. I don't know how to begin to wrap up all this wonderful information that we received tonight. I know we all learned a lot. I know we all feel like we would, the way to go is to partner and that may look different to different people listening in tonight. But I think we all know that part of the partnering is listening. And I think if I took away any one thing, that is it. So thank you to everybody who participated, who Zoomed in tonight, but particularly thanking Sally and Ann for their support, and Tammy particularly, and Lorraine and Kieta and all the members of the Learning Lab. My gosh, Donna, thank you for moderating us, and Cricket, my goodness, thank you for making all this Zoom happen tonight, and all the Conversation Initiative team, and all the members of the Racial Equity and Diversity Committee. A lot of people had a part in this tonight, and it just feels like a lot of good came out of the night. And so we have a few next steps I think we mentioned, and I'll just say again that if your question wasn't answered or you've come up with another question, comments can go to the ready at the BWGC.org. And everybody will be getting emails that will include list of where to go for more information, and possibly information about questions that have come up after we leave tonight. So thank you again to everybody who participated, everybody who tuned in. It was just a wonderful night, I think. So everybody, stay tuned. We'll have more. We just started. Thank you.